Smart controls in Cubase allow you to apply changes to a group of data or over a period of time or to a line, so not just one single data information. For example, what I mean is not just one single velocity data, but you would select several MIDI segments and apply changes to all this velocity data at once. And these changes can be applied not only by dragging up and down, but in several ways. And that works if you use the tiny buttons that appear on the side of this window. So over here, 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 or here. Smart controls can be found at various places in Cubase, and they basically work the same at all these places. There are small differences, and depending on what you want to do, there will be more or less smart control knobs. So what I mean is, for example, if you have applied note expression data to a MIDI note, then you will find smart controls that allow you to work on this curve. And the smart controls are, for example, here and here, 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 or here. So when you hover over that part, then different functions will show up, and these can be used to apply changes to this curve. So note expression. They can be found down here where the MIDI controller data is. So for example, velocity or modulation, these can be worked on with smart controls. The smart controls also show up here in your automation data. So if you select a couple of automation data points, you can see smart controls appearing at the side of this light gray area. And smart controls can also be found inside Very Audio. If you hover over a segment here in Very Audio, you see these buttons appear on the side, and these are also smart controls. I will try to explain these functions at two different places so I can cover all the different functions there is available. And I guess the rest is pretty much the same everywhere else. So at first, I want to try and explain it here in Very Audio because there are a lot of functions available. Right now, there are only 4. And this is because if you want to use all the functions, you have to use here in Smart Controls, the drop-down menu, and say show all the smart controls. So then additional buttons appear, and right now I have all the smart controls shown and we will start to use them. So the first 2 are here in the middle. at both sides. And if you click them and drag, you can see you can time stretch this segment. So the segment stays the same but gets shorter in time or longer. And that of course works for both ends. The smart controls have also additional functions, and I will show you the first one right now with this button. So if you hold down any of your command keys, that means Shift, Control, Alt, anything, you see my mouse changes slightly. And that gives this knob a different function. That is, I can shorten the segment. So it's not stretching the segment anymore. You can use this to put your segment to the perfect length that you need it. The smart control in the middle of the segment under it is for quantizing the pitch. Right now not a lot happens because the pitch is for this segment overall pretty good, so there's only slight changes. You can also change the pitch quantization amount over here. That's the same. The button above here is for smoothing out the curve. So at 0% I have a just normal audio curve, and if I pull it down to 100% it gets a straight line. The button above it shows me a little white line in my segment. Normally it's right in the middle, so that is an anchor. And if I do apply changes to the left or to the right side, it will apply these changes to the whole right side up to the middle, or the whole left side up to the middle. So you see, if I drag the curve up and down, which I can do by using this button on the top left corner, it will apply the change exactly until this white line here in the middle, and the same happens on the right. If I do drag the anchor somewhere else, let's say over here, then I have a shorter right segment and a longer left segment. So now this changes on the right only go up to here, but on the left go up to here. So like I just showed, these buttons on the top right and left, these are for tilting the curve. These also have special functions, so if you do hold down one of your command keys, any of these, you see my mouse changes again. And if I then do use this button, you can see it tilts over the whole length while using the anchor function. So if I put my anchor over here, it will tilt around this area, like so. The same happens, of course, here on the right side. I can also use a special function and tilt the curve over its whole length. Down here at the bottom, you see a fine white line, and this one if I hover over it, it gives me the scissors tool, and I can, of course, cut my segment into different parts. You see it, the white line is not over the complete length. If I go to the side, it becomes a dotted line, and at the side, my tool changes from scissors to the glue tool. And with that, I can, of course, glue this segment to the next one. I can also do it here. So you see my scissors stop here and my glue begins here. And if I click on it, it will be put together with the next segment. Then I have two more rectangular buttons here, down left and down right. These two are for shifting the 4 months. So that changes the main character of your vocals a lot, and you can produce special sounds like Mickey Mouse voice or something like that. And you can see it is the same button as over here. That is on the left, and on the right it is for the volume of that segment. So if it is too loud, you can just adjust the volume with this button over here. There is two more smart controls in this area, and these are the triangles in the upper right and left corner. These are pretty helpful for your very audio work. So if I use these and drag them from the side to the middle, you will see that there appears a light gray area. And this area will be untouched if you apply changes to your curve. So if you now straighten out your curve, you can see it only happened here in the middle, not in the gray areas. In these areas, the curve stayed the same. So if you want to apply changes to just a certain part of your segment, you can use these. And you can also see that if you have already applied changes, so right now I have the straightening the curve slider up to 100%, and you can see here there is only a thin line. So if I move now the left or right part, you can see that the part in between changes. So the straight curve is only here and the normal curve reappears where I put my little triangle. So these are the smart controls of the Very Audio function. And I want to take now a look at the smart controls that show up if you select a bunch of data, for example, MIDI control data or automation data. So if you do so, you can see a gray area appears where all my velocity data is inside. And if I hover there, I can also produce several smart controls. So the first one are shown at the top of your selection, and there is two different ones. One is for changing the velocity of all your data at the same time. But this one also keeps the changes that you have applied before to the same level. So you see nothing happens to these. The distance between these two always stays the same. If I use the double arrow, if I use the single arrow that shows down to a line, it also changes the velocity of all these at the same time, but it also adjusts the difference between them. So if I now pull down, you can see the difference between them gets smaller and smaller. So this is kind of a absolute and relative change to your velocity data. You can also not only find this function here in the middle, you can also find it here at the side if you press your Alt or Option key. If you use this rectangular button over here in the left or right top corner, you can again tilt your curve. But since you don't have an anchor, it will just tilt the whole selection. So you see it works for the left and right the same. So if you want to apply a lot of changes over a period of time, it is really easy to do so with these smart controls like a constant reducing of your volume. So these buttons at the side also have special functions. If you go there and hold down your Alt or Option key, you see the symbol changes. And if I now drag my mouse up and down, you can see that a curve appears, and it is either convex or concave. So that of course also works for both sides here as well. So one trick to get all this data that you changed over time back to the same level is you grab your velocity tool and just drag it to the top and then back down. That will make a straight line again. So if you did apply changes here, you can get it to the same level if you drag it up and down again. If it hits the top, it will all get straightened out. And the last one here at the side is for changes that will be applied around the relative or absolute middle line. So right now, around the absolute middle line, which is here, and you can see the changes always move up to that middle line. And if I hold down my Alt or Option key, you can see the symbol changes slightly, and then these changes will occur around the relative middle point, which right now will be probably around here. So you see my highest velocity value is here and my lowest is here. And in between these two is my relative middle point, probably around here. And if I now use this function, you can see it straightens out the curve or expands it even more around that relative middle value, which is probably, I guess, around here. So there's one more which can be found here, and that is if you hover down to the bottom, your mouse changes again, and that is not available for all the different Midi CC data. For example, it is available here in the modulation data. So you hover down here and your mouse changes. And that means if you go to a certain point, you click and drag to the left or right, you can see the curve is either stretched or pressed together. So wherever you go, here starts the point where to the right the curve is pulled and on the left it's pressed together, or the other way around. So these are like almost all of the smart controls you can find. They are the same here. You can also apply changes to the left or use a special function, tilt it around the middle line, use the absolute or the relative middle line, and even change your curve by stretching it to the left or right.